Welcome back to this special edition of the France 24 debate. We're 45 kilometers south of Paris in Bonnelles, a village that's on the outskirts of the greater Paris area. And ahead of Sunday's French presidential election, we're trying to get the view from the other side, a village that has one eye turned towards what we call the provinces and the other turned towards the capital. For part two of our discussion, we have two guests who've often been with us in the France 24 debate and who've done their own tour of France. Let's first of all introduce Emmanuel, who's the author of Dans quelle France on vit? How would you translate that?
Well, I guess it could be what's the matter with France.
What's the matter with France? Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
And with us as well, Nicholas Vineker of Politico.eu. Nicholas, you've been to a lot of these places. Now, we were talking in part one about Bonnelles, where the mayor is optimistic, says that the future is in the exurbs, these areas in the periphery of the big cities, where you've got commuters and you've got people who are more turned towards rural life. The future is there, you just have to fight for it. Behind you is, we're in the courtyard of the town hall. Behind you is where they'll be voting on Sunday. In the first round, a majority of those here voted for Emmanuel Macron first of all, and Marine Le Pen came in fourth. However, it's not the case in a lot of the places that you went to. And I guess, when you came back from your tour of France, I'll start with you, Emmanuel.
Please.
Did you get a sense that there are parts of France where people have, well, lost hope?
No. You know, human beings don't lose hope that easily. They can feel frustrated, they can be anger, and there is anger, and there is frustration. But there is this no hope accession. People, it's just the opposite. People are very excited about what's going on in France, even if it's labeled as something there is a crisis, etc. But people are very excited about this new election, very excited about this possibility for change.
And the reason that you guys both get out of the office is that Paris is not France.
Of course. Well, to me, it's a nonsense to think that Paris is France. Paris is an island.
You can sometimes forget it if you spend too much time in the capital.
Well, never spend too much time in the capital. France is a very centralized country, and yet things are happening outside of Paris, and people have a different opinion because they're having a different life outside of Paris. So we should take that into account.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, sometimes I feel like Paris is more like New York or like London than like the rest of France. You don't get this feeling of being plugged into the sort of global media economy. When you're outside of Paris, it's just a very different feeling, just perhaps a few kilometers further out than we are here.
On the night of the first round, Emmanuel Macron makes his speech in Paris. Marine Le Pen makes hers in this Rust Belt town of the north called Beaumont. You were there. I mean, the contrast is stark.
Absolutely. Paris is a high employment. It's a wealth creator for the rest of the country. It's a net contributor to the budget. It's really where you get the buzz of sort of today's global economy. You go to Beaumont, the feeling is the opposite. You have this sort of depressed, closed down feeling of an economy that has been there in the past but has moved on. The mines have closed, the jobs have moved out, and these people are left wondering, well, what's next for us? Where do we get our jobs? Where is our hope going to come from? And that's where Le Pen has prospered. She's made that into her bastion.
How deep are the roots that she's laid down?
In a place like Beaumont, they're pretty deep because this is a place that suffered from socialist corruption where people were completely disillusioned by left-wing power. A Front National mayor was elected there, and he's doing a decent job. And people are starting to look to the Front National and say, well, they're just like any other party. They can cut the grass and keep the flowers
as corrupt
clean.
as other parties?
Well, you know, that's also always interesting. How much do people care about these corruption issues? In a place like that, my feeling is they look to the mayor and they say, I know this guy, he's okay. They're not so worried about the other issues.
The French always have had in the past this ideological bent, right? You were either left-wing or right-wing, and is that ideological bent still there? It's just shifted?
No, it's completely shifted. I mean, we saw the result of the first round. Neither of the two candidates are claiming that they are from the right or from the left. They claim that they are different. True or not true, true or wrong, but that's what they claim. That's what people want. And never forget what Jean-Luc Mélenchon did, the number he did for the first round. Almost 20%, which means that, and he is the champion of someone saying that, claiming that he's not from the elite, he is completely different, and that's something that people want to hear now.
You start your interviews for your book in 2015. This four-way splintering of the vote between, actually 5 ways, right?
Yeah.
There's the far right, there's the far left, there's the conservatives, there's the socialists, there's Macron in the middle.
Yeah.
Did you see this coming?
Well, what I saw coming was two things, which is a paradox, in fact. The passion for politics, which still exists in France. I mean, despite all the critics, people are still passionate about politics. They are talking politics in the cafe. You saw that even here, they are discussing politics, etc. And yet, they are constantly having critics towards their politics because they think they are corrupt, they think they don't represent them. That's something very important. But, so yes, France is alive, even though it's not the same kind of France we're used to. France is torn. France is divided. And yet, I don't think it's negative to be torn and divided. I think it's a good sign. I think it's a sign of being alive, a sign of trying to find who we are. Of course, it's not easy, but it's a quest.
You agree?
I think it's interesting because when you actually talk to people, you say, well, why did you choose the FN? And you get into the reasons, and you always come back to this thing where the issue is not in Brussels or in Germany, it's in Paris.
It's in France.
It's with the
They're angry
elite.
at Paris.
Absolutely, they're furious over this candidate who receives expensive suits as a gift. They just don't understand it. They say these people have been milking the cow. They've been living high on the hog for decades, and we can't get them out. So now enough is enough, and we need something else. And I think one thing that's interesting, you talked about left and right and moving beyond that. And I think the parties have tried to find new words for this. And Marine Le Pen says, well, it's globalization versus patriotism. But what they figured was people don't really understand that sort of dichotomy. And so they look for another message. And the message they came up with was, well, we're the party that's going to protect you. And
this is the big difference, right, with the United States, where for Donald Trump, the government is part of the problem.
Yes.
Here, there's the sense practically across the board that public service and the state are the glue that stops the unwinding of France.
Well, that's really, if I was to say there's one French trait, I would say is that people do look to the state. The state has kept this place together through war, through regional differences, linguistic differences. France was, did not exist 1,000 years ago. And everybody looks to the state to protect you against the other guy, from the other guy. And there is a sense that the state is weak and they want to give it its power
Even
back.
Marine Le Pen is talking about
That's
protection
her.
from the state.
Absolutely, and I think that's one thing, maybe you heard it in your discussions, someone like Macron, do people feel like he represents a strong state? I'm not sure.
No, neither am I, but he's young and he's new, which are two good positive elements in this election. The dégagisme that Mélenchon talked about, that's something really that it has a meaning in France. French people want new faces.
You went to small towns, small villages,
mid-level towns,
cities that had lost their luster, where there's
with globalization,
fewer people than before, and yet the statistics from the first round show 3.6 million people voted for Emmanuel Macron in just the places that we're describing. Why is that something that's being perhaps overlooked and not talked about enough? The fact that Macron also got votes in those places?
Well, that's probably why he will get elected.
But right now in France, we're having a discussion of what we were saying at the outset. It's the big city versus the small town.
Well, it's not that easy.
There's two Frances. Are there two
There
Frances?
are more than two Frances. You said there are probably 4 or 5 Frances. France is torn. France is looking into itself. It's searching for itself. So, of course, there are people, even within the banlieue, the depressed suburbs, that in which people did vote for Macron because they have some hope. It's an expression of their hope. You have young entrepreneurs issued from the immigration who are in favor of Macron. Macron is not only the quintessence of, you know, the white center-right electorate voters. Not at all.
When he's elected, though, the fear is that there's going to be these two irreconcilable Frances. Because what we're seeing in the United States is the divide between those who voted for Trump and those who didn't is grown since Inauguration Day. How does he do it? How does he reach out to the people in the places that you've been to prevent this divide from growing?
That will be his biggest challenge. That will be the toughest issue for whoever will become president. Mr. Macron will have to deal with this. He has already started changing slightly his speeches in between the 2 rounds because he knows that he needs to address particularly that kind of people, the people who did not vote for him and who will not be voting for him.
Does he?
Or people?
Are you getting signs that he's up to that?
Of course he knows that. Of course we do. Yeah. Of course, yes. But that doesn't mean it will not be easy to succeed. But of course he knows it.
Yeah, I think one thing that
you think he's conscious of it? You agree with that?
Perhaps I haven't been listening. I've been paying attention to Marine Le Pen because that's my bread and butter. Probably too much. But I have listened in a little bit. And I feel like he's getting the message, but perhaps not quite enough. You know, this message on protecting the French. Macron represents optimism, he represents the spirit of enterprise, he represents openness, but he's not dealing with these anxieties. These anxieties were going to be exposed.
Not yet. He's not elected yet.
Right, well, he's not elected, but I think even in the message, he should say, I will also be a president who protects you. Yeah.
Okay, but getting the message to me is not having to deal with it. I mean, getting the message, okay, it's good, but will he be able to govern
well, that's a big
in
question.
That kind of France? That is the real question. That is something that is fueling anxiety among everybody. People who are going to vote for him and people who are not voting for him.
Yeah, I think exactly. And we have signs already now that, you know, from the first day of his presidency, if he's elected, there's going to be trouble because you have Jean-Luc Mélenchon, this charismatic left-wing leader, who's essentially blackmailing the potential president.
Blackmailing?
In a way, he's saying, well, if you don't give up parts of your program, there's going to be trouble. And he's used pretty violent language to describe what's going to happen. And you know, protests, you can imagine anything that will all come to pass unless Macron gives a little leeway to the...
First of all, we're going to have parliamentary elections. So that's going to be the key also. Before the summer, before Macron starts to govern, if he's elected, we will have to go through parliamentary elections. And that will probably offer a new image of what real France is, politically speaking.
If he's elected, because you wrote a piece earlier this week showing there still is a narrow path to victory for Marine Le Pen.
It's a very narrow one, but there still is, and people have looked at the numbers and put them through models, and mathematically, yes, it could happen. If Macron's potential supporters don't show up and Marine Le Pen's supporters do show up, then you could have a result that doesn't look like what we see in the polls now. We could have a surprise result, but it's a remote prospect. She's more than 3 million votes behind. That's a lot of new support to win.
I think Macron will get elected, but with a tiny margin. It won't be 2002. Absolutely not. It won't be like with Le Pen's father, when he was against Jacques Chirac, and Jacques Chirac got elected with 80% of the votes. That won't happen this Sunday, for sure.
It won't happen this Sunday. The irony is everybody is sick of, we've been talking about it, right? They're sick of the incumbent political class. And yet nearly 8 in 10 French citizens came out to vote in the first round.
Because that's the only way they have to express themselves.
Because everyone's saying there's going to be a high abstention rate in the runoff.
Well, we'll see. I'm not sure. I think French people are conscious of the fact that this is a decisive election. This is a key for their future. And they know they don't have that many leverage. This one, France is a centralized country. It's a country with this democratic system with a runoff, and it's very bipolar. So whoever don't go to vote this Sunday will have to think twice, really.
I think, you know, bipolar or paradoxical, a lot of these things, these are cliches about France, but there's also some truth in it. People want a new face, but they also want someone with experience and plenty of strength. They don't want to experiment, I think, is a big part of it. And when you look into the detail of the polls on someone like Marine Le Pen, there is a great deal of concern about her competence and her experience, her ability to lead, even among National Front supporters.
You talk about cliches. When people outside of France look at us, they see strikes, they see this revolutionary spirit. Yeah. You're describing a more conservative France.
Well, I think there's a lot of evolutions that may have been missed by the cliches. First of all, the strikes. You know, there are laws for minimum service now, so strikes don't look like what they used to in France. And there is a great substrata of conservatism, indeed, in the country. Yeah,
I think France is very conservative. That's what I found out during my tour of France, much more than what we think, because people are afraid, scary. And this anxiety leads to conservatism. So Mélenchon, this extreme left is a politician, is a good talker. And that's someone that people like to listen to because people want to, at least in words, put in practice
they want to vent.
The revolution, exactly.
Yeah.
But they don't want any change in their real, concrete, daily life. They want to keep what they think is the few they have. And that leads to anxiety. And Marine Le Pen is playing with that.
And Yvette, in your book, let's tell it like it is. There's a lot of people say a lot of racist stuff. There's a lot of people say a lot of sexist stuff.
Right. That's why I'm saying that France
are people just more unfiltered than they used to be?
Well, they think about being unfiltered. Yeah, I think it's in the air to talk true.
Why is that?
Today, and not only in French society. I think it's something that is going through all this Western modern world. So it's not particularly French. People in France, people are what you said I wrote they are, yes. I met with quite some, racist people, etc., xenophobic comments, that's right, misogyny also. But people, at the same time, people are ready to be helping each other. Maybe more than ever, and that's something we don't really talk about.
At one point in the book, there's a village in the east of France where they have these sort of vigilante groups to keep the town safe. What is that about? Explain that to us.
It's all about being anxious. It's all about being scared by the other, the one whom you don't know, the one who is coming from abroad, the immigrant. Here in Bonnelles, it was the first places where they got immigrant and everything went fine. But in places like the one you are mentioning in my book, you don't have such centers. So people living there don't have the opportunity to clearly, in practice, have encounters with immigrants. And so they don't get the chance to know each other and to forget about these fears.
You went to the south of France, and you said you witnessed one town where it was almost like apartheid.
Yeah, it's a very strong word, and segregation is a strong word. But this is really the FN in the south of France, which is different from the north and different from the east, where there's almost a colonial mentality. A lot of these people used to live in Algeria, and we're used to living in fortresses with the natives on the other side of the walls and the white people nice and safe in a community. And this spirit remains in the south of France. And in this town, Beaucaire, where I visited, it was very striking. All the French people, if you'd like to say, or white people, had moved into the outskirts, and all the immigrants, people who were brought into France to work the fields and things like this, lived in the middle of the city. And there are two cafes on the central square, white people in one and immigrants in the other.
Yeah, but Nick, don't forget that they are both French, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're both French, but they don't mix.
They don't mix.
You're absolutely right. I noticed that also in each of the cities I visited. It's some sort of a natural reaction today to have difficulties to mix into social life. And yet, statistics prove that there are more and more mixed marriages. So, but in the daily life, it's not that easy. People tend to ignore each other.
I just wanted to say another point on this, the racist speech, and I hear a lot, well, are French people being more racist in the street? I would say I haven't heard that much of it, but if they are, who are they getting their example from? I would argue that the politicians have given them a license to say things they never would have said before. When you have François Fillon who says, I've got the names and addresses of the people who investigated against me and leaked information, you're breaking taboos. And in this election, I have seen a lot of taboos go out the window. And they got accused from the US election where things that were said that could never be said before. And it's happening here. So the average person says, well, if François Fillon, if Marine Le Pen, if Marion Maréchal Le Pen can say it, why can't I say it?
Cool. And Sarkozy also had that kind of language.
Is that the fault of politicians rabble-rousing, or is it just this more general culture where you can just press send on Twitter and rant?
Well, it's the chicken and the egg. Where does it begin? Is it the trolling culture on social media that's infected politics, or vice versa? I think it goes both ways. But what we've seen is this is a scorched earth election where whoever was up there decided, I am going to go for the win no matter what. And that was in François Fillon's attitude, and it's also in Jean-Luc Mélenchon's attitude, where he says, I'm not going to play the game.
So I get to ask you the question I asked Anne a minute ago then. The scorched earth policy going into the poll, the next president of France, you're saying probably Emmanuel Macron, but we'll see. How does he pick up the pieces?
He will have a lot of work to do. He will have a lot of work to do. And I think a priority will be to address these anxieties and these fears about competition, fears about France being turned into some kind of big supermarket. He has to tell people that's not the way it's going to be. France is going to remain France. We're not going to take anything away from you, and we're going to make it easier to live your life. But he's got to work on that message, and well, a lot will need to be done. But then there's the political coalitions and things like that. It's going to be another huge challenge for him.
France will always be France, yet behind the beautiful houses that we see in the village of Bonnelles here. Inside there's probably IKEA furniture, the same furniture you find in every home in Europe and the United States nowadays. The cultural references are the same. Is France still France, Anne-Yvette?
Oh yes, of course. France is still France and will remain France with all its paradox and history. We have a rich history. We'll not lose it. We're not losing it. We're not forgetting it. We're just trying to adapt a changing world.
Is it doable?
Well, I'm not the one I'm not elected, you know, I'm just an observer of this society. But as Nick said, Mr. Macron will have to address and to act also, because the message is very important, but the message is not everything.
The message isn't everything, and of course the proof will be Sunday night here on France 24 when we will be bringing you full election coverage from 7 p.m. Paris time. And Nivat, I want to thank you. You're